Okay, good morning. Today is December 9th, 2024. And today I want to talk about co-brokering. So we're going to talk about co-brokering within the same firm and co-brokering outside your firm. We'll be talking about buyers and sellers for this. So there's a couple things that we need to remember when we do co-broker. We need to remember who we represent and what our agency duties are. How we do this representation is going to be based on contract. We need to remember the agency law, the things that it requires. So the agency law requires that if we represent somebody, we are doing so with a written agreement. And then we need to remember our DOL requirements. That means we need to remember that we have to have a signed agreement to do a showing or a signed agreement to do a listing as far as our representation. And at the end of the day, the requirements of how we get paid are similar to all of these, and we need to have our written agreement showing that we do have our agency relationship and the amount that we are going to get paid in an actual number. So how do we co-broker a buyer from the same firm? This would be you and a partner from the same firm as you wanting to both help a buyer. First, we're going to need 2 copies, so one for each broker's file. But when it comes to actually writing up the agreement, when the brokers share the firm, you can use the same form and we can just make a copy right on from one file to the other. So firm A is going to be the broker's firm that they are both licensed to. So this would be an example of, say, the John L. Scott Bothell office or the John L. Scott Mukilteo office. And then you and your co-broker can both be written down in the agency paragraph under buyer broker. Now, it's possible that you may not fit, so there are other places you can put it. But you can just pop both of your names right in here. And then, of course, make sure that you are exclusively going to be representing. So you both have the opportunity and option to help this particular buyer. Again, these conversations for what to fill in the blanks for the rest of the contract are going to depend on your situation specifically. But the takeaway I want from this is that you and the co-broker from the same firm can both be listed in paragraph 3B. Now, the amount for the brokers right here that you put down in the compensation is the amount that's going to be shared between the 2 brokers who are helping with this one agreement. So the way that you split up this money is completely up to you. It just needs to be the total number of the buyer's obligation, right? So this would be the number that we put down that the buyer would be responsible for in total for paying should the seller not be offering compensation. This amount, again, can be split between the brokers as they decide, and there is no requirement for how that needs to be split. So how do we co-broker for a buyer outside our own firm? So I wanted to kind of pose this question first. A broker is sharing a buyer with a broker from another firm. And if they get 2 Form 41s and they're using apples in this example because we can't talk about percentages or really dollar amounts when it comes to the proportions to the sale price. They put, say, 5 apples on one and 5 apples on the other. Because they intend to evenly split the 10 apples total for their commission. Is this going to be an issue since you cannot collect more than the compensation listed on your buyer broker agreement? Or should they each have their own 41 marked non-exclusive, but put 10 on each? So there's a couple different ways that we can go ahead and write up when a buyer is being helped by 2 agents from different firms. The one example we can do is to have 2 Form 41s that are exclusive, representing that obligation for the buyer to pay, say, this one agent's portion, and then the other broker agreement being for the rest of that other agent's portion. So you can divide those 2 into how that money is going to be split between those 2 brokers. In this example, you could put 5 apples on one and 5 apples on the other to total 10. Or again, split it in any way that they deem fit. Because there will be 2 buyer broker compensations paying out at escrow, we can go ahead and compare those numbers to the Form 41s that we have on file for the making sure that we are meeting those requirements. They could also have two agreements where one is exclusive and the other is non-exclusive. Now, the exclusive one will need to have the full compensation amount. The non-exclusive can also have the full compensation amount, but make sure that when the contract is written, the agent with the exclusive agreement is the one who does draft up the offer. So to put these in sort of a real perspective here, I pulled them both up here. So you'll have two Form 41s, one for firm A and one for firm B. Each agent is going to act as if they are writing up their own agreement for this one particular buyer. Now, firm A is going to write that they are exclusive, and firm B is going to write that they are exclusive. In this example, we are going to do the total compensation amount as it were to be split between the firms. So in this one, my example was $10,000, and I just chose to split it evenly between firm A and firm B. Now, this does not have to be the way it is split, but it is an example of how to split it. So at the end of the day, what we're going to see is we're going to see our CDA come through for firm A showing $5,000, and firm B is going to have their CDA come through showing through for $5,000. It will match this buyer agreement, and the total compensation amount is going to match up with the purchase and sale agreement. Option number 2, they were saying you can do one that is exclusive and one that is not exclusive. So the way that would look on this one is firm A, which is you, would have an exclusive agreement. So I circled the exclusive part over here, and firm B, the co-broker, would be non-exclusive. Now, the broker who is exclusive must be the one who writes up the contract, and the total compensation shared is going to be listed on firm A's buyer-broker agreement. Firm B, this broker should not be the one to write up the offer, but can also write the total compensation. And the reason is a non-exclusive agent is going to only be truly paid if they are the ones to write up the offer. An exclusive agent is going to be paid regardless. So you want to make sure that the one who is exclusive is the one that writes it up, because the one who is non-exclusive doesn't have any way to go after additional compensation. It's just another way to kind of show that it's being shared between firm A and firm B. Now, the total compensation to be paid is going to go on the exclusive agreement. And this one, I just took the same example from before of $10,000. That number would get listed on firm A's agreement that's exclusive. And there is no harm done to a non-exclusive agreement who does not write up the contract, who also lists the total compensation. So how do we co-broker sellers within the same firm? For sellers, we're going to make sure that we also still have 2 copies of these papers, but firm A with both brokers licensed can use the same form and just take a copy from one to the other. So if you co-broker within your same firm, and this is going to be that 4-digit office number within that same office number, then you're going to go ahead and write your office firm in the listing firm line, and you and your co-broker can be put in the listing broker line. If you guys don't fit, the co-broker can also go into the other category here, and you and the co-broker can sign the bottom of this agreement. Now, in future forms, so things like the lead-based paint and anything else that maybe a broker needs to sign or initial, such as maybe the a status change sheet, it is not required that both brokers be the one to initial or sign where brokers are required. One of the brokers does need to be doing it. But this is just to appoint that agency relationship. We need to create the relationship. We need to create this contract in order to advertise that we are representing that client. You would go in the listing broker. Your co-broker would go in the co-broker name. And as long as you have your contract with your 1A that shows you are both representatives of the seller, then you will both be representatives in the listing input sheet. The 1A is a contract between seller and firm. The listing input sheet is just input information to go to the Northwest MLS. So if you're going to be on the input sheet, you also have to be on the 1A. So if a broker is listed as a co-broker on the Northwest MLS, does it require them to be on the listing agreement and eventually on the purchase and sale agreement? More specifically, I have a broker who's looking to add to their stats. And in talking with another broker at another firm, they have agreed to add them as a co-listing broker. However, I believe this would create an agency challenge and question. I understand the Northwest MLS may have their own policies and will research this as well, but from a representation standpoint and state compliance, can this be accomplished correctly? So yes, even if a broker just wants to be added to change their status and not be paid, that if a broker advertises that they are an agent of the seller, then the broker must be an agent of the seller, or that broker is engaging in false advertising. A broker cannot be an agent of the seller unless the seller has signed an agency agreement with the broker's firm, naming that agent as an agent of the seller. The broker may not simply just claim it to be a listing broker in the MLS, unless the broker's firm has signed that listing agreement with the seller, naming that broker an agent. So co-brokering sellers outside the firm. If you choose to co-list with a firm outside the one that you are currently part of, aside from maybe your reasons and questioning, what's going on there, we will also need two separate forms. One form is going to be listed with firm A. The other form is going to be listed with firm B. Now, you are going to fill out your listing agreement as you normally would, not having co-brokered it with anybody else. You'll put your name in the listing. Oh, I'm sorry. I put you where it says listing term. That's not right. Down the next line, you are the listing broker. And the co-agent from the other firm will also fill out their own listing agreement with firm B and their name. Please excuse the places that I put the name. That's completely wrong. Now, when it comes to filling out the compensation, this is important because we are listing this property. The listing firm compensation in firm A and firm B is going to be the total amount paid to the seller's brokers. So if we put our minds back to the buyer-broker agreements, where that compensation was split between two different firms, the same thing happens here. Now, these are exclusive listing agreements. So in this case, if you were sharing a $10,000 compensation, you would put $5,000 on the left form and $5,000 on the right form. That would show that $10,000 is being equally split between firm A and firm B. Now, escrow can pay out this way, and we can collect this way. We just have to have these agreements in place. Here's my example. A total of $10,000 would be $5,000 for the listing firm A and $5,000 for listing firm B. Your CDA, which is in our office, our Form 40, is going to reflect what this says. Now, looking back at buyer-broker compensation, these two firms need to be talking to each other because that seller has only agreed to one of the options listed below. So whatever the seller has chosen as the option listed below is the one that gets selected. The seller's offer of compensation is going to be the same on the left as it will be on the right because these are input information that we send to the Northwest MLS. This is not necessarily already allocating how a buyer is going to be paid in a different firm from the other buyer broker. So we're just going to match up section B. When you do the listing input sheet, sorry, I don't know why I put that in the buyer side before, but when you do the listing input sheet, you're going to go ahead and put your name in one with your office number, your broker firm, and the co-broker who you're brokering with their office and their office firm. This again is the listing input information. It's not necessarily the contract. And by putting both names in here, there has to be a contract for both agents to be representatives of that client. So all contracts that you co-broker have to have two sets of paperwork filed, one for each agent. Don't forget, when you write your purchase and sale agreement, you're going to have to disclose any brokers who are involved in the transaction. And because there's only space in the purchase and sale agreement for one broker, the other broker should be listed on the 42A. So remember to add this in, and anytime there's more than one broker, or if you have a licensed transaction coordinator, they would also go on this as well. Now, listing the people on this sheet is not doing anything other than a disclosure for who that party represents. There's nothing further that you necessarily need from this point, and this does not mean necessarily that the broker that's listed is getting paid from the sale. As some final thoughts here, and when we do our file checks, just remember your buyer broker agreement must match your pay. Your listing agreement must match your pay. Each office will see their own agreements. So think of it as if I were to do this completely separate from anybody else, what is my portion going to say? And how can my transaction coordinator check all the things to make sure that I am adding up right? Your firm is referenced in the firm number. So your firm will be the office number. If there's a different office number, then you're a different firm. Anytime that number is different or your office is different, it is considered listing from two separate firms. Referrals are a form of giving or receiving payment, but not a representation. So you can do a referral form, but that referral is not going to list that agent on any public advertised space whatsoever. So referrals will not get your name on the Northwest MLS as an agent of the seller. And your CDA must match your 1A or your 41, as well as the purchase and sale agreement. I hope I was able to shed some light on some of this, and we'll be happy to stick around if you have any questions. Thank you for listening.